and welcome everyone. This is the ComicBase live stream. I am your host, Pete Bickford, and we'll be having kind of a different talk. It's just like every once in a while I need to remind myself why it is a terrible idea for me to be doing these things whatsoever, and this is the kind of thing that would do that. Basically, we'll be talking about the business of putting on a software release, which, as it turns out, is something that is quite likely we're going to want to be doing in the very near future, and talking about it from the point of view of people who do the software releasey type stuff. Let's see if we can get that little prompt to go away here with my name on it. Give me just a second here. Come on, H2R graphics. You can do this, kids. I've got to turn off the key and we'll handle it that way. Anyway, guys, so what I mean to be doing about this whole thing is, in a couple of weeks, we are actually on record as saying that we are going to be shipping our next version of ComicBase. This is something we typically never do. We never want to be announcing software releases before they come out because it spoils all the surprise. It gets rid of any chance you ever had of having what they call earned media coverage. But more importantly, it takes a lot of the mystery out, and it makes things kind of weird. By the way, if you guys could give me a quick thumbs up, thumbs down on sound on the whole thing. We did a fair amount of messing around with the mix on the whole thing. So if you guys, just when you're sitting there, if it's generally okay, just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, or it's too quiet, too loud, whatever else. Finally had some chance before the show to do a little bit of actually tweaking with the settings so that we can cut down some of the room noise and whatnot. So we hope this is better, but never really know until we try it on the internet. But anyway, but we'll be going, like I say, giving you a little bit of the behind the scenes dirt of how it is we figure out what to do for our new software releases, why it is that we schedule them when we do, what features are going to make cuts, what aren't, how you can make sure that your feature does make the cut if you're suggesting it, what we are doing behind the scenes to actually prep a software release, as far as getting it all out to you guys and so forth, and just kind of give you a run up for kind of like what we're doing on the whole thing. We won't be talking in detail about the next version of ComicBase because we'll be showing it off to you very, very shortly. But basically, we got one more live stream like this, and after that, live stream after that, we will have shipped, unless something goes horribly wrong, which is always a possibility in life. But anyway, so we hope you find it interesting, and it's the sort of thing where, as I'm thinking through the live streams ahead of time, like what should I say, what should I not say, and so forth. This was definitely one that had a lot more, "Ooh, don't say that," kind of things in it, which means it's the kind of thing they'll probably say anyway, just because it makes live TV sort of interesting. But anyway, Richard Scott, unfortunately, is not able to be here, but he's here in spirit. Want to say hi to the folks out here. Mike Beam is joining us here from Vancouver, Washington, or Viejo from Minneapolis. And it looks like it's actually kind of a nice day. Minneapolis Fringe Festival. I do not know what that is, but it looks like a play. Her 24 plays, some outstanding, some dreadful train wrecks. When we do the next ComicBase After Dark, which we'll probably do right after shipping, I'd love to hear more about that. It's the Minneapolis theater scene sounds like it's just lit. Our mod, Mr. Gregory Hecht, is in the house, saying hi from especially folks who are dealing. Hope everyone's doing well, especially those folks dealing with former hurricane, now tropical storm Debbie, which apparently came in somewhat close to my place down in Florida, but you wouldn't know it from looking at the garage cam. Everything seems very chill down there, but hopefully everyone's doing well. Department of Comics is here from Northeast Florida, and also apparently not too traumatized by weather, hanging out with a Snapple peach iced tea. Robbie Weinberg's in the house. Let's see here, reading comics and waiting. Let's see, question about who saw Deadpool Wolverine. It's getting great reviews, and it's making just absolute bank box office. A lot of people are using that one as an excuse to write their told you so's about the perils of going woke and going broke, and what happens if you actually release just a fun superhero thing that has got no woke in it. Between that one and Inside Out, the anti-woke crowds are really kind of crowing, and I'm with you in spirit, man. I hope it's true, because I'm tired of being lectured at in the movies, but I like movies for fun, and I'd love to see more. Let's see what's going on here. Department of Comics, more movie banter and the whole thing. Fabian Frangish is joining us here. Sounds like sound is good. Excellent. Very great. All right, great to hear it. All right, we are good to go. All right, so let's get down to it. So like I said, the announced ship date, which we never do, you basically just want to launch product from the skies on people when you have something new, because among other things, if I say that, hi, we have the new Uber Mega 2000 coming out next week, and I'm selling, Mega 1999s this week, you are not going to buy a Mega 1999 this week unless it's at a very steep discount. And so you never want to announce new products unless the next one is preferably like coming out like the next day, and you only have like 6 copies left to fire sale, which is about actually kind of where we're at on ComicBase. 2024 in terms of physical product, we've got like 1 copy of Express kicking around right now in the entire company, and we still don't even have file copies. We're literally going to have to go back into production to make the file copies that we keep on shelf, because so much has switched to digital, and you guys cleared us out. So thank you for everyone who did that so during the sale. But one of the things we did during our sale is, because it was a sale and because we didn't want people to fret, we had to say, oh yeah, by the way, this includes, as usual, the update to the next version of the software, and that one's shipping. And we thought, well, do we leave it open-ended, or do we actually, put the date down in actually put that down in ink? And we actually did. So we're saying, announced the ComicBase 2025 will be coming out a little under 2 weeks from now, on the 20th. And we're not going to, like I say, if you're part of the interior test group, you know a lot about it. But if not, then we're not going to spoil too many of the surprises on it. We think it's a really cool release. We're really stoked about it ourselves. And we think you're going to dig it. The deal with ComicBase, as always, is when you buy our software, it comes with not only the software, everything with it, the program, the content, the pricing, and so forth, but it also comes with a year of updates too. The program, the updates, and the pricing, which come out every week. And so anything new that we've done during that entire year, you get as part of your subscription. And then our evil plan to take over the world is that we hope during the course of that year, we've convinced you that it is the best thing on the planet. And you definitely want to re-up and resubscribe, which we then do for you at a deal, and then we can keep the whole merry party going. That's been the plan forever, but a lot of people kind of forget that the new program is one of the things that comes with it. So we will actually have a fair number of people, and I think this is just a habit of software in general. They say, well, I can't buy ComicBase 2024. I hear 2025 is coming around the corner. I'm going to wait for that one. It's like, no, you don't have to wait. You'll get it for free. But anyway, we felt like we had to make that point explicit. So we went and did that. So I want to talk a few things about the software process, and I'm going to beg your indulgence on this one, because like I say, this is one of those talks that, like, you kind of wake up at 6 a.m. and you kind of argue with yourself for a day ahead of time. It's like, how much should I actually talk about? Because it gets very much into the philosophy of, like, why do I even do what I do? Why am I doing this and not, as I often laugh about, writing medical billing software, or working for another company, or doing whatever else? And why do we do the whole thing? This definitely has a threat to touch on that stuff, and I'm going to try not to get too deep in the weeds on the whole thing, but some of these things are bound to come up. But I'll start with sharing some, like, dirty secrets of doing software for a living. So we've been doing this now for 32 years, doing ComicBase. And anyone who ever does software will, the thing that they will know in their hearts, but will not want to actually say out loud, is it's way more fun being a programmer when you're nowhere near launch time. If you're at the point where you're either just like, you're creating a new product and you're a year or two away from any human being actually seeing it, that's a blast. You can just try crazy things. There's no pressure. Basically all you're trying to do is, like, say, hey, check out this cool thing I did, and impressing your buddies and things like that. And that's a wonderful time to be. The other place it's wonderful to be a programmer is when you're, like, working as a staff programmer, and you're just insulated from the whole release cycle in general. Like, there either aren't big releases of your software, or you're a million miles away from the next one that requires any kind of, like, really deep down hard work, and you're just sort of tweaking. You're fixing bugs, you're improving performance, you're adding tiny features that have been on somebody's wish list. That stuff is actually pretty, it's a nice sense of satisfaction at the end of the day. Not too much pressure. Everything's really pretty good. And it's good right up to the point where some moron in marketing says, we need the 4th quarter release out here. And can I have a commitment from your team as to when that's going to be coming? At which point, your life as a programmer immediately takes a turn south, because at that point, all the things that were kind of like fun features you were thinking about that like would be fun to do someday, but you're not really sure if they will make the schedule. Suddenly there's going to be a list, and the list is going to mean something. And like, favorite things you want to put in will either be on the list or off the list. There's going to be things that you didn't really care about putting in, which somebody else really wanted, which suddenly is going to occupy every aspect of your life for a long time. And everything just gets very, very, very pressurized. And the worst part also is, let's say it's been a project, like just you've been having a great deal of fun with your new thing, but oh my God, now we're going to show it to customers. It's like they are going to judge us, and it gets to be terrifying. They might not see things the way you saw them. They might use it in strange ways that cause bugs and problems that you never tested for. They might just not dig it, which is a real thing. And honestly, any artist who does anything, whether you're a photographer, a fine artist, a writer, whatever else, I mean, I've lost track of how many writers I know who never published outside of their own desk drawer. As what yeah, what do you do? Like, I'm writing. Oh, that's great, wonderful. Do I ever get to see it? No, you never do. Because I'm a writer, little w, or in the worst case, is people who's like, I'm a writer, capital W, which is to say, I write a lot and I feel great things. I think great thoughts with great big words, and I never, ever, ever show them to people because then they might not like it, and that would be bad for me. Anyway, software programming is a creative art, whether people tell you that or not. And, there is a certain amount of terror when you actually have to show it to someone outside the dev team, and really you guys get to render judgment as to whether everything we've been doing for the last year is worth a damn. You'll do it, with either your expressions of delight or disdain, or just whether or not you buy it. And so, the fun is the moments when you're not doing that. But on the other hand, there really is a time when, like, if you want to stay in the game at all and be a real person in the field, you do got to ship. As Steve Jobs famously said, you might think you're an artist, as a software programmer, but real artists ship. The story for that one, and brief digression on this one. Back in the 80s, when I got into doing my first programming at all in like an Apple II, one of my big heroes was a guy named Bill Budge. He had written a thing called Raster Blaster, and then he came up with this crazy idea of a thing which was a freeform pinball construction set for the Apple II, where you could move around bumpers and things like that. And it had the idea of physics, and you could basically wire up your own things, and because it was very good graphically and very good at the idea of modeling the physics of the whole thing, you can construct your own pinball games. He disliked it because he thought it was a neat idea to do, and he could use it to express himself. He sold this off to a guy with a new company called guy's name was Trip Hawkins, and he's just started a new company. By the way, all the software companies back in the day were all they were all called names to, like Microcode or Microsoft. Webs. They didn't have webs back then. It's like Megasoft. Tennessee Softworks. It would all be things like that, where this X amount of code or X amount of technology. This guy Trip Hawkins started a new company, and it really was very much a departure. He called it Electronic Arts. The idea was that you weren't a programmer, you weren't a coder, you weren't an engineer, you were a software artist. You were an artist working in this new medium of computer code. And it was really revolutionary. And the funny thing is, these days we mostly think of Electronic Arts as somebody, just a big megacorp that more or less cranks out repeats of software that they've been doing forever. But back in the 80s, it was really a revolutionary concept. The idea that a coder wasn't just a grunt. A coder was a guy trying to express something. It was like you had an idea for how you want something to go, and you could create it in this very plastic realm of code. And if you did it brilliantly, beautifully, you could call yourself a software artist, or you could call yourself something other than just a coder. Coder is like just a lackey. It was like someone, it was like a punch code operator. It was like the worst thing ever. And I definitely came of age during that whole realm, and so it's very much colored my thinking. But as Steve Jobs, notoriously said to Andy Hertzfeld, who, by the way, is also a fantastic, and I will say, software artist. He's the guy who more or less made all the guts inside of the original Macintosh, Quick Draw and things like that. It's like, he's like, look, I'm an artist, man. You can't rush this whole thing. And he's like, yeah, you might be an artist, but real artists ship, because there is there's the deadline, and you've got to meet it. And that's just the reality of our world. Anyway, So let's talk about what makes a release for for these software artists at Human Computing, right? So the way our software release schedule goes is basically we're thanks to the internet, we're in a software release cycle called always in production. you know which is again, back when we started, it was the realm of literally 3.5-inch floppy disks. We're talking old school here. And the idea is that you would come up with a list of features that you thought would be compelling to the customers. You would be able to, if you basically is something that you could advertise on a list and say, yes, the new version of ComicBase will have the following things that will get you very, very, very excited, and you will want to plunk down money, whereas beforehand you had looked at it and say, well, maybe if it had this other thing, I would do that. And then you'd code it, you'd get it into a certain stage of being done. You would test it, you would release it, and inevitably within 1 week you would find some bug that makes you wish, oh God in heaven, why didn't we find that bug before we had to ship out 1 million discs? Because now we have to not only fix it, but print another 1 million discs and ship the new 1 million discs out. Those were fun days, huh? Anyway, almost nobody does software like that anymore. Nowadays, thanks to the internet, the interwebs, we can now do this thing where, like, we get something out there, we test as well as we know how to, we put it in through beta groups, things like that. And if we decide to change anything later on, either because a bug was found or because we said, here's that feature that didn't quite make it, but now we've got a little bit more time, we can just stick a new version on the servers. And if you guys are downloading the software, we can rig it up for automatic updates. So it says, oh, hey, there's a new version available. And it doesn't cost anyone any money, really, to get the new version. So that's been the reality, especially since software, because internet connections got much better over the years, at least the last 10 years or so. Pretty much that's the way almost all software outside of, like, say, government or big business works, where you're kind of always tweaking on the latest model. If there's a problem that comes along, periodically, sometimes people do it every month, sometimes they do it every couple weeks, sometimes, like us, you do it 3 times a day. You'll do a tweaky extra version of the software, which is in some way a little bit better than the version you could have downloaded just the 1 or 2 builds earlier. And that's kind of like the reality of our world. So what we're doing now is, for most of the year, if there's some little things that come along, is either someone comes up with like a really bizarre case where it can cause an error if I, hold down my left finger and I, type the following 17 keys in rapid succession while, disconnecting my Ethernet port, whatever it is you got to do, to cause a problem. If we can replicate it, find the problem and fix it, then we fix it. It's in our code base. We will spin the build out that night and move on. Same thing goes if we have little tweaky things that we wanted to put in, it didn't quite make it. We can always just say, we had a little time today, let's put that in, pushed out, pushing through testing and production, and okay, great, that's part of the new builds. So little stuff is getting added all the time to the program. And if you're watching in if you go to the setup menu in ComicBase and you say, check for updates, internet check for updates, the preferences have an option there to say, did you want to check for interim updates or just the big updates? Now, if you're checking for just the big updates, then at that point, once or twice a year, we'll roll up all the things we've been doing for, say, that quarter, which, so we don't just wear you out with little software releases. But if you want to see just every little thing we're doing, you can check the interim updates, because that basically is almost like our daily builds. See everything as we go. And we try, mostly we're pretty good about this, but sometimes not, to keep you up to date on the website about what's new about the different versions. Where you can go under support at comicbase.com and look at the list of beta updates, and they'll tell you, okay, yeah, and in version build 1217, we tweak this, that, and the other thing, and it'll tell you what we're working on. And then about once a quarter, usually, this last year, we only did one post-release update for the entire software program, because honestly the software's really stable this year, and honestly we also at a certain point started working on big things behind the scenes, so it delayed us putting out other types of updates that would have been more structural in scale. So we did one big update. It was called ComicBase 24.1, and that one rolled up all the big stuff there. And you can see that under the releases. If you say check for updates and it says, there's new updates 24.1 available, it gives you a little bullet list of everything we changed in that one. That's typically how we work for that sort of thing. And we're doing those sort of changes all the way throughout the year. But there comes a time during the year where we start looking towards the next year's major release. So the major releases are those are the big numbers at the start of the whole thing. The 23s, the 24s, now it'll be the 25s. And the idea for the 25s is those are the ones where like we have something big we want to say. It's either going to be something that's going to change a fair amount of the under stuff of the database. We might be adding a lot of brand new fields that had not been part of the program before. We might be changing, in the upcoming case of this one, we might be changing the evaluation model we use to talk about graded books. Something with really big implications to the program. Which you can't just sort of slot into a smaller update. And typically they involve months of lead time to get server stuff right and pricing models and things like that. And so that's the stuff that we stage for our major releases. And that's the sort of stuff that you'll see with our next major release, which we codenamed Magic Castle. So there'll be a lot of little features, but there's going to be at least a couple of these really big structural things. And the big structural one, and I think we've made this one kind of an open secret on this one, is that probably of most interest to people in the comic market is that we are adopting a much more sophisticated model for how we price out graded comic books than what we've been doing in the past. And we've been kind of stress testing it for a number of months now, and it's actually doing a much better job of predicting like what auction results would come in if we sit there and say like, okay, our model for what a near mint would have been was this, and now a CGC 9.0 came in, and how close did we guess as to what that would have come into, and it's been much better than what we've done in the past. So we think you're going to really enjoy it. But like I say, it is a big change for us. So when we're talking about the big releases, those again are the ones that are talking about structural stuff, and we've got a goal behind the big releases as well. Because if we're going to go all the trouble of having a 25.0 as opposed to a 24.1 or a 24.2 or something, our goal in short is this. We want to make it so that the changes are big enough to notice, so it's like, oh yeah, I'm definitely using ComicBase 25. I know this because it has the big thing that 24 did not have, and we want to make it so that honestly you're a little sad if you ever have to switch back to an old version. So for me, when I know that we're getting close on when we're building the new version, because I during that time I'll typically live in the course of the day between both the new current version that me and only a handful of other people know about, and I'll flip back to the one that all of y'all are using, because I got to be able to support that version and do things with that. And if I'm getting to the point where I kind of hate going back to the version that everyone else is using, then I know I'm probably on the right track in terms of building the new version. So that's kind of where I kind of on a gut level, know where we're going. To help us come up with what goes on the new versions and things like that, we have a big feature list. It gets rolled up into a big text file that I keep on a couple places on on our servers and on my desktops and things like that. We gather the feature list from a variety of sources, everything from internal people on the team who had things. I certainly can put things on there that I have been seeing that, hey, I want to address. Like for instance, 1 year it was like, look, the variant thing's getting out of hand. We have way too many variants. They're going beyond the 26th variant. We have to have a way of dealing with that. And you guys might remember about 3 years ago, we had to adopt an entirely different variant structure so we can count up to infinity if we have to. Where all the variants after Z are now V27, V28, V29, so forth. And I'm glad that we got out ahead of that one, because at the time we had envisaged doing that change, there were only about a dozen comic books on the planet that had ever gone beyond 26 variants. And since we've done that change just a few years ago, there have literally been hundreds of titles that have gone like that. We also, in previous years, have done things like adopting the idea of item titles. Like, what do you do with a comic book whose name, as you're looking at it on the front of the book, or sometimes even the indicia, is wildly different than its official classification? So the classic example is something like, I'm looking at a comic book that says The Three Musketeers, and I might notice that the trade dress in the back of it says Classics Illustrated. But I mean, how am I to know that that's really Classics Illustrated #1 third printing, because all I'm looking at is something that says Three Musketeers. I want to be able to search for Three Musketeers and also find that book. And so we've done things like this in the past. And so those are some features that I was able to just shove on the list. But there are other times when like people on the team who are answering tech support calls will say, man, we're people are really getting confused about X, Y, or Z. It would really help them if we could do something about that. And that's the sort of thing that will also, get that put onto the big list. When people are in the chat right now and they say, hey, man, I'm having trouble with this, this, that, or wouldn't it be great if we did something which did that? You've definitely got our ear when we're doing this thing. And if we go through the chat, or certainly if we talk to you and say, that does make sense, that gets added to the big list of features. There's forums on where you can suggest things like that. If you're part of the internal testing teams and stuff like that, there's a dedicated Slack thread we've got for future feature ideas and so forth. But yeah, we'll grab ideas from wherever we can get them. And that will get added to like the list of features to consider. Now, how do you get from features to consider to features that will actually make it into the program? It basically comes down to a couple, different judgments on our part. First of all, we ask ourselves, well, how hard is it to make this feature happen? If it's trivial, it generally can get done in hours. If it's just oh, could you change the name of this thing from that to that, and it won't confuse anyone else because I'm the only guy who ever looks at it. No big deal. Do you think that this thing should be defaulted to from being on to being off as a default? And then you sort of talk around the implications of, well, if we did that, how would it affect people? But if there aren't a lot of weird implications and everyone's widely agreed on it and so forth, and it's not too hard to implement, those things we'll just slide them in. We'll barely even make a note about it. The next thing we'll ask ourselves is, let's assume that the feature is not trivial. It'll take some work. Next thing we'll ask ourselves is, well, how much difference is it going to make to people, right? I mean, is this something that one guy is really, it's quirky of how he does his collection, and he's like the only guy who's even going to notice if we do this thing? Or is it one of these things where if we do it, everyone will benefit, and it'll be like, we'll just immediately say, oh, that's much better. I'm really glad you did it that way. So obviously the broader the appeal of the feature, the more likely that we are to spend time to, try to figure out how to do it right and make it all happen. If it is something that benefits just a couple of people, sometimes we'll still do it. Actually often we'll still do it if we can convince ourselves that doing it, adding this feature won't mess up everybody else. And here I'm going to admit, ComicBase is, it's my baby. And so, yes, I gatekeep ComicBase pretty good. And one of the things I gatekeep ComicBase based on is the idea of, I don't want it cluttered up with a bunch of random crap, which is to say, if you guys know my background, I came out of Apple from the user interface design community. And one thing I'm pretty cognizant of is the idea that they say the interface of a computer program is a lot like a dishwasher, is that there's always room for one more thing, and everything you add makes everything just a little bit, less clean. Every time you add a new button, every time you add a new screen, every time you add a new column to ComicBase, it doesn't come at zero cost. I mean, it's got to earn its way into the program. If it's, it isn't, I guess you could think of it like the appliances in your kitchen, right? There's always a new gizmo on the whole thing, but very few of them are going to make their way onto your counter full time, because if they're not earning their place there, then they're kind of in the way. The same thing goes for software features. I mean, there's lots of ingenious ways we have of hiding the complexity that comes with adding new features. So we can add a lot of depth to the program without impacting people, but you still have a weight to everything that you add. It's not just the weight of the programming time to get in there, it's the program time to support it. If the feature has to do with data, then if I sign on for adding one new field into the program, I'm also signing up to have our content team support that field, adding new things to it, dealing with corrections to that thing, dealing with arguments about whether something's formatted properly or has the right data, until the end of time. So it's like, yes, there are any number of things we could add to the program. Whether or not, what's the total page count of a comic book, is one that is a piece of data that we don't track for every comic book. We could add it, sure, why not? But does adding it make up for its weight in terms of what everyone's going to have to do in terms of, having one more field on everyone's screen, having to squish everything a little bit tighter, having to add work to the content team and so forth? I mean, if it's something where you can say, oh yeah, it has an amazing amount of utility. If you did this, then suddenly the program could be used for all these new things that would really get a lot of people excited. Then we'll take on the weight. But we're not going to kid ourselves that features, in general, every feature has some weight. You don't get anything for free. It's a plastic medium, but there's a cost to everything, and especially the mental load is probably the number one thing we fear, is making things so complicated that no one can deal with it. And so so like I said, we do gatekeep pretty good on that one. So not every feature that seems like it's a good win is going to make it in. Even if we do agree with you, yeah, I can see how that could benefit you a little bit. It has to have enough oomph behind it that it justifies the cost of doing it. Other things we will ask, of course, will it make us any money? This one is obvious, because this is what we do for a living. It's how I feed my family. It's how my employees feed their families and so forth. And it lets us buy all sorts of neat things like stream recording gear and so forth, and clothes. So anyway, so at the end of the day, any company who's doing this thing for anything other than love is going to ask themselves, it's like, well, what's the economic impact of this thing? I mean, if you can suggest a feature that's going to make us definitely a bunch more money, man, you will have our undivided attention. And that definitely gets weighed into the whole thing. But then the other thing I'm going to say is there's a real thing we will put in there, and I don't know a lot of companies who will admit this to you, but I will, is that features will come in because we think that it makes the program more interesting. So, I mean, it isn't just that we use the program ourselves pretty much every working day of our lives. So, I mean, we do, as they say, eat our own dog food. But in terms of if someone comes up with an idea for something and it makes us say, oh, hey, yeah, that is cool, it's going to get an outsized share of our attention. And a lot of times we will put in things that just, it makes the program more magical for us, and we hope more magical for you. Despite the fact that, yeah, I can't make a business case for this at all. It just feels better. And you can think of any number of things like this in the program, everything from badges, to the sound effects that come on and different things, the drag and drop of pictures and so forth. It just, yeah, I mean, what's the business case for saying in order to add a picture, you drag it onto a title and it gets automatically filed into the right place? I mean, can I prove that we made any more money for adding that feature to the program? No, I can't. Not at all. I mean, like, if I don't think I could even market that. It's, but the fact that it works, and it works so beautifully, and it just feels right when you do it. No, it just feels right. And so, yes, we add it to the program. If you got a movie clip for a particular issue you want to associate with it, just call it the same as the issue, drag it out of the title, and boom, you've got that. And it gives you a way to organize your digital media libraries and so forth. It's just a neat thing. And so, yes, if you can suggest things like that make us go, oh yeah, that does feel right, definitely it gets our attention in a big way. Yes, Department of Commerce says, we're very happy you can afford clothes, period. Yes, and I am as well. Let's see here. Department of Commerce, lots of comments here. I've been yapping out for quite a while. The physical discs, and yes, EA's Deluxe Paint 2. Wow, I forgot about that one. Let's see here. Did they yesterday with the bug for the mobile app? Yes. Yeah, we fixed a thing for Department of Comics yesterday, which actually that was that was like a nice rewarding debugging day for for me. Again, it's nothing that drove things forward. Yes, even when I'm working on new versions of programs, we still have to support the old ones, and we found a minor bug that had just been bedeviling. It was like a weird special case thing, but it was just bedeviling Department of Comics over there, and we were just very happy to knock it off. Kind of pat yourself on the back at the end of the day, have a beer, you feel good. But anyway, but when we're talking about new releases, it's like, yeah, you got to go a little beyond that. Anyway, so but when our idea for what the features list looks goes on the whole thing. Yes, I mean, if you work in a big company and you can formalize this with a number of software tools and so forth, there's supposed to be I've worked at companies where there was group choice ranking and grading, and people would literally try to put up a business case percentage for each feature, and almost try to project manage it on a feature by feature basis. Well, if we add the ability to add this field to the whole thing, well, we think our total business cost will be X. And then you had to get someone from marketing to weigh in and say, well, we think our potential revenue opportunity is Y. And if X is much less than Y, then of course the feature would get fast tracked for Q2 release. I have worked in those companies, and there is time and place for that sort of thing. But the reality, like everything else in business, is it's a lot quirkier how decisions really get made than most of the people in the C-suite are willing to tell you out loud. So because I'm an idiot, I'm just going to tell you the quirky factors that you all suspected all along of why did Apple say that we were going to put this into the next iPhone and not that? Why did they do this with the OS? Why is ComicBase going to do this X, Y, or Z? I'm going to say there's a lot more of the quirky. No, it just really appealed to this person. It's a lot more like that is we're basing it all off of data and things like that. Like if Google tells you why they added a feature in or why they changed a given interface element, they always talk about being like this. We're totally data driven about the whole thing. And more than almost any company I've ever known, Google is data driven about the way that they will do interfaces. In other words, they will put 1 million people through one version of the interface with one set of wording or one set of buttons arranged in a certain way, and they'll put another 1 million people through it, arranged in a different way, and they'll pick the one that just performed better in the tests for whatever metric that they're going for. And at the same time, the big business decisions they'll make largely based on somebody's gut. It's just the way life is. All right. So anyway, let me see here. So all right. So we talked about that, and I did want to say one other thing. I want to compare this to. I saw a recent thing. Thomas Dolby, you guys might know, a couple weeks ago, I went down and saw a big 80s, extravaganza called the Totally Tubular Fest down in Huntsville, Tennessee. It was 8 different bands on one day. It was all, guys from the 80s that were just really cool. Everything from Bow Wow Wow to, the Thompson Twins, and Thomas Dolby, the Tubes, etc. It was a great concert. It was just, it was one of the things where everyone got about enough time to play about 4 songs before they clear off and the next guys come on. But anyway, I just happened to be watching it, kind of like a TED talk. It was a talk with Thomas Dolby She Blinded Me with Science fame and many other things. And he was just talking to the Berklee School of Music at one of their programs about being a businessman and also being in music. He's talking about how he got his start, and it was a lot of people don't know this. He got his start as part of a busking duo. So imagine, again, Mr. Future, boy scientist Thomas Dolby busking away with some other guy on the streets of, I'm assuming it's someplace in England, but anyway, the deal that they had, he said, busking was great practice for getting down with the realities of the music business, because it worked like this. There was a certain restaurant that everyone who was busking in this town liked to eat at, and so you'd go and do your bit, and the tourists would come by and they throw money in your guitar cases, and after a certain amount of time, if your guitar cases had a certain amount of money in them, then you could close them all up and you'd head down to the cafe, and you could eat and drink until you're done for the day, and then get up in the morning and do it again. But you couldn't go eat until there was enough money in the guitar cases. Well, they figured out pretty quickly that the fastest way for them to get their guitar cases filled with the requisite amount of money, they could do it by about 11:30 a.m. on a good day, was just play Stairway to Heaven again and again. Apparently that's the one. I think maybe people going by said, wow, that's a really long, painful song. I just feel badly for you, so I'm going to drop a couple of quid in your box, your case as I walk by. But apparently that would do the trick, and that would get them out of busking for the day the quickest of everything else they would do. Unfortunately, not particularly rewarding. You also could, come up with your own compositions, which nobody else knew, and you'd be sitting there busking until about 3 p.m. until you had enough money to knock off for lunch. But some combination of those two things is really what's required in order to feel like you're an artist and still pay the bills. And very much reminded me a lot of how we make our decisions for how to go forward with features and things like that when we're doing ComicBase. Is we get paid when we make you happy. I mean, that's the bottom line. It's like, if we're not making you happy, the game is over. But to the extent that we have the ability to vary up what we're doing in a way that makes you happy, makes us happy, makes everything kind of interesting, then we're looking for a mix that gets us paid, right? I mean, if you don't do that, then the whole game stops. But which also, you want to do something that's rewarding to you, as to ourselves as well. And it helps, again, I think that we are users of our own software, so we're not in completely different worlds than you are. I mean, everyone tracks their comic collection a little bit differently, and a lot of the art of what we're doing is how do we do what we're doing in a way that allows people to have the kind of variance in how they use the program that's still rewarding for them. But at the same time, we are kind of loosely all on the same page. We all love comics. We all have way too many of them. We're all trying to keep track of the whole thing, and we're in the game. We're in the game of trying to keep you on top of your own collection, keep you informed of the whole thing. But it allows us also to express ourselves within the software. So yeah, I thought it was a decent metaphor for the whole idea of things. So the next question that comes down to is, when do we know we've got a release? So our schedule is something like this. We about once a year aim at having a major software release, regardless of what's going on. So, I mean, at the point when we release the new software, assume that it is the best we know how to make it. It's handled all the major problems that we know we are trying to handle. It's that we've really gone to the wall for a long time to try to make it all happen. With that said, though, you release, say version 24, and you tweak on, different things from here and there. You had little glitchy things that come up. You handle, content issues and so forth. But at a certain point, you'll start piling up a list of features that need to be put off for the next version because they involve structural changes. Like if we're going to change the evaluation of how CGC comics work in the whole thing, you can't just slot that one into the current version because there's a whole architecture that comes with it. And so that one gets added to the big future release list. And at some point, we'll be looking at that future release list and saying, well, is that enough? Is that, if I were to, look at, you put in bold all the ones that we're definitely doing, and you say, if we did that, would you have what you'd be proud to call a new version of ComicBase? And it's a gut check that we do. We do it in our staffs. Usually, we start talking about it in about January, and over the months that follow, periodically, as we're talking about, different things that we could add in, take out, move around, we kind of look at that list and we say, well, is that the release? I mean, and I've been on this timeout. It was a number of months after we had a big list of items where we looked at it and we said, well, I don't know. It doesn't feel like that's enough. It's, what else have we got? Because one of the other tricks, of course, we've been doing it for 32 years. So most of the obvious things you could think to do with comics, we've already done. So we don't want to just be adding on junk for the sake of junk, but we do want to have a bunch of really interesting things to do with the program that, when you put them all together, add up, and you say, oh, that's cool. And again, it comes down to, if I were using the new version, would I be a little sad to have to go back and use the old version? And so that's kind of the gut check we're aiming for, and that tells us when we've got it. And I'm going to, just as a preview on this one, say, yeah, we're definitely there with ComicBase 2025, at least for myself. I'm looking at the list of things we've done here and going, oh yeah, this is a lot better. I like this a lot. But that's what it comes down to. Next thing that we'll do in our cycle because again, we're aiming for one of these releases about once a year, is we'll actually, and this is actually one of my favorite things to do with the cycle. We started out with ComicBase 1.0, and I had the genius idea, right? I was going to make it look like a comic book, because back then all software had manuals. And so the question is, well, what do you make the manual look like? Because the manual is the biggest part of the package. It was just the manual and a bunch of floppy disks. That's what you were selling when you sold software back in the day. And so my genius idea is, well, all right, I'll hire a real comic artist, and and I will go ahead and make the thing look like issue number 1 of a bitchin' new comic book, and then you'll open it up, and it'll be in a comic bag, and then that'll be the manual. The discs will be inside the manual, and that'll be the deal. So we did that, and it's we had a guy who was working at Malibu at the time. He created a brand new comic book character just for us, and that if you guys had ComicBase 1, 2, or 3, that was what you got when you were using the program. It was different versions of that manual and that program. And by the way, if you guys know ComicBase history, the first version was 1, followed by 1.1, followed by 1.2, followed by 1.3, followed by our marketing director at the time screaming their head off at me, saying, "What the hell's wrong with you, engineer boy? You don't sell version 1.3, you sell version 2.0. 3.0, 4.0, and eventually we got it." So anyway, that's why we've been doing this for 32 years and only have like 25 major versions of the software out. So in case you guys are keeping track. But anyway, eventually though, the software had been taken off a bit at that point. We had a little more money to throw around at the whole thing, and we said, well, what would make the coolest possible cover for our next edition, right? Because at this point, very wedded to the idea that we were basically putting out a comic book looking thing every year. And we hired a painter called Kent Bash. We found him, he'd been doing work for fantasy and science fiction. And we said, okay, we'd like to do a thing that looks like that, and then he did some wilds. I mean, it was the craziest take on superheroes that you've ever seen in your life. If you ever had a copy of ComicBase 3 or 4. And then is because that we didn't learn from anything. We said, well, let's switch it up here. Let's have you do a detective look. And he did the craziest, it was a detective one. And on one hand, it's pretty, you check it out and you say, well, that's cool. And it's nice painting. And something's wrong, and I can't quite put my finger on it. And then eventually I realized he'd forced the perspective in a weird way. And I said, hi, you're a great guy, and you're obviously a very famous artist. You forced the perspective in a very weird, non-traditional way that is making my head spin. And he goes, oh yeah, I do that on purpose. It's kind of a throwback to like pre-Renaissance techniques of painting everything. It makes people look at your painting and not know why they're looking at it. And it's like, I'm thinking, yes, makes me look at it and makes me think I'm also getting a headache. But I never had the guts to say it out loud to him. Ken, if you're listening, I'm sorry. But anyway, eventually though, we settled on to, we found a great cover artist. He was really the cover artist of my dreams, a guy named Glenn Orbick. And then later on his partner, Laurel Bleckman. They did, decades worth of covers for us. And we always got to just switch up the cover every time we went. And the way I would work with him, because again, terrific guy, just absolutely, if you see the covers we did from about 6 on out, I'm just delighted with these to this day. What we'd basically do is we'd just say, hey, let's see, we've done superheroes, so we've done mystery, so give me a sci-fi. And then he would come up with the amazing rocket escape thing that we'd going on for ComicBase 11, or we'd like to do an action adventure thing, and they would do like an Indiana Jones type thing that we saw for ComicBase 6, and as time went on, we've done all sorts of things. We've done Western and worlds, but we basically would start with these very broad prompts of just what do you feel like doing this year, guys? And so be like, And there's always people who are arguing for pirates. We finally did pirates, I think, 3 years ago. But anyway, what we typically do is we would suggest a thought on the whole thing. He would send us a sketch, and we'd say, okay, great, that sounds pretty good. Or could you tweak this, that, and the other thing, and take it from there. Of late, I've been much more art directy on this sort of thing, just because there's stuff that I've definitely want to get out. Some of the covers that I art directed the heck out of were the ComicBase 10 cover, where I thought, hey, look, it's our 10th, it's our, nominally our 10th anniversary, it's really like our 14th, but it's our big number 10. I'd like to do a full-on nostalgia one, very Norman Rockwell. I think it should be a kid in candy shop, reading comic books, absolutely freaking out with what he's watching, candy all around him. And I think, by the way, it should be June or May of 1952. And oh, by the way, he's a Cub Scout. And by the way, I think my kid would look really good in that as the Cub Scout. So that's the first time I ever dared art direct Glenn Orvik to that extent. But he did a fantastic job with it. We found a period correct Cub Scout outfit at the time. We dressed up my kid, and it was a fantastic cover. I love it to this day. And I was very pleased when I saw that. They were actually selling just reproductions of that cover at Comic-Con for thousands and thousands of dollars in one year. And so I thought, that's pretty cool. I've got the original. But anyway, that's typically how we'll do these things. Of late, the last cover that I want done, basically we're going with a magic theme, because I realized that we had never, in all our time of doing comic-based covers, we had never done that kind of like that old school 1940s stage magic kind of cover. And I thought, it probably has a lot to do with the kind of movies I've been watching and books I've been reading as well. Very much thinking, well, how can we make this kind of dark and really interesting? And so came up with the concept of like a 1940s stage magician with kind of crazed look on his face, holding up a card, presenting it to the viewers, like, it's like, is this your kind of card kind of idea, and that the card should be like, like on fire, as if it like a flash paper, because then you could use the fire to illuminate the magician's face. He could otherwise keep in darkness. I'll admit, I was kind of thinking, very much inspired by a book of old 1940s magic touring posters. I'd look through one day, as well as very inspired by the books of magic work that you saw from the old Vertigo series and so forth. And we reached out to different artists to do this one. We wound up going with the same artist we did for our last one, which I'm also very thrilled with. So I think you're going to love the cover when you see it. There are we did some tricky things with the card, and I'm just going to say watch for it. Because the code name on this one is Magic Castle, and the idea was that, well, why don't we also see if we can pull some magic tricks with the art itself? And so we are very likely, this is one of those features that may make Final Cut, may not, but there's already in the whole thing, there's already variant art in the whole thing, but there's more than meets the eye on this one. So please look out for that one if you like staring at the cover art that we work on this one, because I'm very proud of how that one all worked out. As people asked about the art and the code names, the code name, it comes from the idea of, again, I come from working at like Apple and big software companies and so forth, and you never talk about your releases. They never have an official name until they're shipped. And so the project team, in order to kind of compartmentalize things and also give you an excuse to get cool t-shirts for the project group, you always have a code name for what you're working on. Typically these code names for us are either based off of the feature set, like for instance, the code name for the release that we were doing right around 2000 was called Millennium, and that was the the big one where we first introduced the idea of like you could just wave over the pictures and they would float into view and so forth. Millennium was the one before that. Minority Report was the one which literally we stole the effect of waving your hand over the pictures and having them float into view from the visual design effect that they used on the movie Minority Report. Other times, recent releases, we've seen. There's one called Burning Man we did a couple ago, where it's literally we have an idea for the art, or we've gotten the art in ahead of time, and we're not going to tell you what the art is, obviously not until a ship date, but because we've been staring at the art the whole time, we know what we're doing with it. And so the code name's got nothing to do with the feature set typically in those cases, but it's almost a description of the cover. Of late, what we've been doing, because we have internal it's kind of like internal external testing groups, where we invited a bunch of you folks to come in and essentially see our work well ahead of time and be part of it while we're not even in the alpha state. Sometimes right more in the dev state of things. We're right after the internal development guys. Obviously we're me and Mark and Jill and those guys, we're swapping builds all the time. But one of the smarter things we ever did in all the time we've been spending developing software, is when we were going to do ComicBase 2020, we knew that we were rewriting literally every line of code in switching a database engine, switching languages. So, I mean, everything about this whole thing was going to be different than the code base we were working from. We were completely reinventing the program. It was a 4-year effort. It's why ComicBase 2020 is so different than ComicBase 2017. But we knew that the chance of releasing this thing and have it be stable are nil unless we have a ton, and I do mean a ton, of user testing ahead of time. So, we need to get this out with all you guys on all your weird configurations, with all your bizarre language settings and countries and everything else that's going on. And we've got to let you guys just bang on this thing. And so we came up with a very terrifying idea to us, which is the idea, well, what if we let you see not just our buggy software, but software we know is not even done yet, and let you try it out. And, we ran the risk of and leak it to your friends and do all the other horrible things that people could do, which no one has ever done. I've really just been amazed how well this has all worked out. But basically invite all of y'all in behind the wall. I mean, get to see, get to watch the sausage being made. Basically invite you in to our own Slack groups, hook you up with introductory dev builds, let you try things out, and as soon as you say, hey, I got a problem with this, that, and the other thing, you literally can fire off a message to the Slack group, and it's straight to the dev team. We instantly know about it, and we can instantly fix it and say, okay, yeah, it's fixed in build 763. Download it now. Boom. We've been doing that. It worked out so beautifully for ComicBase 2020. We decided to do the same thing going forward for 2021, 22, 23, 24, and now 2025. So that was definitely one of the things we like the best. The code name on this new version is Magic Castle. It had to do with the idea of, we knew what the final art was going to look like. We have been typically, during the development stage, we typically have dummy art that we show to the team as we're working, because typically we're talking with artists and working, for final artwork and so forth. And sometimes we're waiting on the artists to get done, and all they have is is a sketch to send us. And sometimes, not that we're bitter or anything, but typically we will work with the dummy art right until we're about ready to ship, and then right as we're at what would be, and it's called beta, that's when we switch in the real art. And if you guys are on the internal development team, you've just seen the real art go live on this one. I have some notes myself in here. I'm going to try to pick up the pace here a little bit. When we do the builds, what's our strategy for how we do this stuff behind the scenes? When we're launching a new major version of the program, it typically starts out with database and server stuff go first. It's stuff that's invisible to y'all. It's, we can see it because we're dealing with all that crap in our lives, but it's very much the machinery behind the curtain. There's no visibility to the users at all on this stuff unless something went horribly wrong. But to the extent when you're doing a new build, if there are like brand new server things that need to be happening, if data needs to be transmitted between systems in a different way, if new APIs need to be written, so forth, that's typically the very first thing that gets built. It's completely invisible to y'all, but it's critical and it needs to be done. And so we always do the things that are invisible first. After that stuff's done, typically months before we go live with the real version of the software, we do what's called a fork in the development cycle. So for instance, with ComicBase 2024, which I believe the code name on that was Archangel, which if you've seen the cover makes sense. What would happen is right around when you were looking at the builds, right around the time we were doing 24.1, we basically make a copy of every single thing that we're working on, the databases, the code. There's about 1 million programs that go along with ComicBase that do everything from, handling serial number generations to file tools to whatever else. All that stuff, a copy of it gets made and it gets moved into a folder that's, tagged for the next development group, ComicBase 2025 or whatever else. And at that point, for a while, we have to maintain both sets of stuff in parallel, which is, if you guys all worked software, you'll know is a pain in the ass. Because if I'm working, on one hand, I've still got 2024 that I have to support, and if anything comes up with that we need to, handle a bug or something like that, And I also have 2025, which is now getting wilder and wilder different than 2024 because I'm changing. I'm adding all the new stuff we're going to do. Well, if someone comes back with a bug to 2024, I need to make sure it happens in both places. Whatever fix happens has to happen both places. And certainly by the time I make the fork, it's like a fork in the road. You want to make sure that you're no longer adding major new things to the old version. So after we shipped ComicBase 24.1, we knew it was time to do that fork. We'd rolled in all the major features that were going to happen for the ComicBase 2024, phase of the program. And at that point, we got serious about busting out all the things that are going to be brand new for the new version, and we could work on those in seclusion. And it's a number of months working just internally on just the ComicBase folks before we were able to open that up and show that even to the volunteer internal testers. Those I remember this time out especially saying, yeah, okay, we're really early in the cycle because we changed some fundamental valuation things and we weren't 100% sure how they were all going to play out initially, and so we very much want to get people's feedback on their own collections and so forth, and so we're like, yeah, we're welcoming you in the door, but watch out because it's a lot of sharp edges around here. Some of the rooms have not even been built yet, but so watch your feet as you're moving around the new structure. But that was several months ago, and now of course it's very polished up. And so you go in, you build the software, you build the new features in, you build the major features. At a point in the software, once you've built all the major features that you intend to have in the new release, everything up to that point is typically called the dev mode or the D stage. You'll see builds in old school software that's like 24.0 D 17 or something. People call that beta, and it's not beta. Alpha and beta and dev actually mean real things in software. Dev is we're still building. It's like walking into a house where they haven't even finished the framing yet. Alpha is when you've got all the wall, to use the house metaphor, you've got all the walls up, you've got all the plumbing in, all the electricity's been roughed in, but maybe the fixtures aren't quite where you want them to be and so forth. But all the basic guts all work. All the major features are there. And so far as we know, everything is big stuff complete. Beta would be the equivalent of, yeah, we've got everything up there. There might be some painting left to do, but the fixtures are all in. You can walk around it. Everything major that you could ever think is a big deal has already been handled. And at this point, you're just tweaking. And then typically after that, once you think you've got it perfect, you do what's called release candidates, which is to say, okay, I think if we don't touch it right now, we could release it and everyone will be happy. This is immediately followed by release candidate number 2 because you found something and you weren't happy. And so even if nobody else found it, it's like, release candidate number 2, where we found that we had not done this, that, the other thing quite right, or we need to, whatever the thing is. And then that's followed then by release. So this time out, we invited people in well into the dev phase. We usually invite them into the alpha phase, where the major stuff is pretty much done. And we've just, we reached beta a few weeks back, and now we're getting, we're basically, the builds are up there now are basically release candidates, and so that's where we're at right now. When to release is the next question. So, like I say, the thing that, here's the inside ComicBase route of things, and this very, very much goes from our history, is the idea of that we wanted to come up with a release about once a year. Once upon a time, prior to ComicBase 10, the software, all the content and everything else was done once a year. I mean, there wouldn't be weekly updates. I mean, we'd have people grinding away on pricing. We'd have people grinding away on new content, people scanning pictures. We'd be writing new software, and we'd try to get it all together once a year, ideally at Comic-Con, and release the brand new discs. And then it would try to import your old data and merge it into the new stuff. Now, that hasn't been the way it's worked ever since ComicBase 10. ComicBase 10, the internet had arrived, and we got to the point where they thought, well, we think we could use this new internet thing, and without making you move your data into a new database every year, built on whatever new software we've done, what if we just keep on tweaking your current database and we add the new stuff as we go? And we can do this every week. We'll push new content down to y'all. And then periodically we also can push program updates the same way. And that was the ComicBase 10 was the beginning of the modern era for us. So that's be about 16, 17 years ago now. Again, for complicated reasons, it's not exactly tracking with the actual numbers. With ComicBase 10, that also entered when we had to start buying comic books like a comic store. We couldn't just rely on, say, Comic Buyer's Guide to provide us with a list of all the new comic books in the world, or just what our own collections had put up with, or whatever we were surveying out of when we were doing pricing surveys and so forth. We had to be in the game, and we had to be able to be on top of releases every single week. And so that was an epical shift for us. But it's a long way in the rearview mirror at this point. So we've been doing it a really long time like that, and we're getting pretty used to it. The good news about that one is it means that by the time we're due to ship the major software, we kind of don't have to worry about the content as much because we've been doing it all along. But when we, because we started out and Comic-Con was the big time to release anything, Comic-Con by default is about where we would try to push new versions. And so the biggest open secret in the planet is, if you're wondering when the next version of ComicBase is, well, if you don't know anything else, you got to ask yourself, well, when's Comic-Con? And even though we're not even exhibiting at Comic-Con anymore, that has had such an influence on our release schedule that it wasn't until really COVID where we started moving off of that in any big way. COVID threw such a monkey wrench into the works that we actually fell back into releasing right around Black Friday. And since then, the last 3 years, we've been trying to claw our way back into releasing more like during Comic-Con, because you really want Black Friday to be its own separate part of your year. If you're releasing right at Black Friday, you are in a world of hurt just in terms of your own personal stress level. I'm just saying. So yeah, Comic-Con is definitely where you're going. Another thing that's behind us shipping when we ship and things like that is because we've had our sales so weighted towards Comic-Con in the past, for just right since the very first time that we were shipping ComicBase at all. And people, especially later on when after ComicBase 10, where we introduced the idea of a subscription, that would come with it, is, well, if you bought it at Comic-Con back in 2005, well, that means that your subscription is up right about the time Comic-Con 2006 rolls along, and you, with a little bit of wobble between years, that's where our year really starts in earnest, in terms of, like, to this day, a lot of our year is really backloaded in terms of when people are expecting to renew and make purchases. So we very much are in the mode where we want to make sure that we're in position to deliver by Comic-Con. Now, one thing you might have noticed is I make a big efforts to say that whenever you buy ComicBase, you're always going to get a year added onto your subscription. You could buy in April, and your subscription is going to run out a year from whenever it was going to run out, since then. And so I'm trying to get people the idea, like, hey, you don't need to buy to Comic-Con anymore. So, because let's face it, it would be kind of nice having some money in April. Because think about this whole thing started off with Pete in his apartment working late nights and something, and this whole company's been bootstrapped for 32 years. We don't have outside funding and so forth, but we've been living basically like farmers, most of our time as a business, and that, you kind of plant through one thing, you put all your resources out, and then you hope to God the crops come in, and you hope to God people buy them. And at that point, it's like, oh, yay. And everything's great. And you have a couple beers and have a party, and then you plan for the next year. And that's very much in the way that, our model has been. It's only of relatively recent vintage, say the last 10 years or so, that we've managed to get far enough away from that model where you don't kind of pull into April and go, whew, yeah, I remember money used to be nice. Yeah, it'd be nice if we had some money in April, huh? Anyway, one of the things that we have done this last year, and I'll be honest, we took a hit on it, is we made explicit the idea of when you buy ComicBase, that we're explicitly saying, yeah, we not only would like to sell you the next version, but we're going to move the default to that it's going to auto renew, and we're going to pay you money essentially to do that. We'll say, did you want to buy it for one price with the old deal where a year from now we're going to say, hey, would you like to renew, or would you like to save like $20? We'll give you money off. We'll take it right off the top. If you will just allow us to move the default is next year, we don't need to ask you we've already got the idea that you want to auto renew. It's what every other subscription model in the entire universe has been doing forever, but because we're us, it seems like an alien way of doing business for us, and so we felt not only that we had to very explicitly ask for your permission to move on to this model, but we also felt like it's worth it for us to bribe you very explicitly to do that. So when you've been buying the program, you've been offered that choice of models when you go to make a renewal. But the reason that we're willing to do that is we really do want to make it so that we kind of regularize our own revenue throughout the year, and also just give people the idea that, look, it doesn't matter when you jump on. If your buddy hears about that he needs ComicBase in April, let him buy it in April. We'll still give him a good deal, and he'll get the savings throughout the year. He doesn't need to wait till some Comic-Con sale or something like that. So that's what we've definitely been trying to do throughout the year on that. So for us, Comic-Con is definitely the way to bet on whole things. So I think we've covered that one to death. So when to release it, code-wise, like I said, content-wise, we're typically we're doing our work from week to week, so we don't need to worry about anything in particular on content, unless, and this really isn't a factor anymore, if we were really close to some milestone that we could maybe make some kind of hay about marketing wise. So, when we were at 899,000 comics, if we could slip a couple weeks and get the thing so we could say over 900,000, that was worth slipping a couple weeks in order to do that. And I'm going to say probably the last time we're going to be able to do something like that that's content related, it happened a year or so ago, where we were saying the release before that, we were saying we have nearly 1 million covers in the program, and then we got to say we have over 1 million covers, and now we have like 1,060,000. There are no cool numbers left for us. We had over 1 million comics starting, 5 years ago, something like that. And then, we've been adding so many covers and so many things like that, that we just literally, we've run out of cool numbers until we start talking about, I think we're at 1.25 million, 1,250,000 comics right now, 3 million, newspapers and all sorts of other things. But I mean, I think until we can brag about 1,250,000 covers or something someday, I don't think you'll see us slipping data, slipping a release due to content, because there's no milestones left to hit. But that was typically something in the past we used to wait on. For us, otherwise, we obviously had to wait until the code had to be good in the past, but we've timed that out pretty well. And then the one other thing that we enters into our thinking when it comes down to releasing stuff is sometimes there's interrelated software where it's part of the program, but it's not really part of the program. In this case, ComicBase Mobile is the one that comes to mind, in that it's a separate program. We throw it in. If you've got ComicBase Pro or Archive, you can download it for free. We have major things we're doing this time out, but because we farmed out the development of that to a third party, and also because it's not integrally tied into the release, it's kind of a marketing opportunity for us if we can say, oh yeah, by the way, along with our new thing, there's also a new version of ComicBase Mobile coming out. But if you can't lock it in, right away, exactly day and date for when you're shipping the rest of the program, it's something where sometimes it's nicer from a marketing standpoint to be able to say, oh, by the way, and there's also a new ComicBase Mobile. But because the ComicBase Mobile is actually independent and you can download it anytime, it's like a nice to have. So, in which, by the way, we are aiming for a new ComicBase Mobile, and yes, we're waiting on some code. So we hope we can make that happen. But that's the other thing that enters into our mind when we're talking about how we are doing the timing of the releases. I want to talk a little bit more about how we do our releases. What's it look like for us, and then I want to get the heck out of here because you guys have been patiently, listening to this thing, and I hope you find this somewhat interesting. It's a rare treat for me to actually be able to give you guys kind of like a look behind the scenes, because I don't know anyone else who's going to explain the thinking that goes into your favorite software or your favorite product of how they're actually doing their work. But this is it's an oddly personal thing in that we are a small shop. I am the one guy who's authorized to actually kind of tell the stories tale like this, and we do very personally rely on your support. So I figured I want to tell you this like we were sitting at a barbecue, and you're just saying, hey, so the new blah 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 you make, so tell me what goes into that. And so I'm trying to give you the same answers I would do if we were just sitting around having a couple of beers at a barbecue. This is not the corporate speak version. The corporate speak version will come out in a couple of weeks, where we'll be talking about how really really great the new version is and just concentrating on features. This is very much like how the sausage is made. So when we actually do a release, so what are we feverishly in the midst of doing, and what are we going to be doing for the next 2 weeks? Once again, it starts with the content, which again, we've been doing it all along, but there comes a time when we say, okay, this is the database that we're going into battle with. So the one that gets pressed onto the disks, if you were to get the disks or download it on day of, the version of the database that goes on those disks where you say new database and you create a new one is not going to be the database from that week. It's going to be the one from a few weeks back, where we were at a nice stable point. All the data had been checked, cross-checked, verified, cleaned up, priced, everything else like that. But there's a time we have to say, yeah, that's the one. And the one is the database that's coming out right as we're speaking right now. That's the one that's going on to the disks of the final release. After they get done pushing this week's update, we're going to update our master database on this one. It's once again going to go through a big QA quality checkup. At that point, it gets compressed down into a couple different forms. It becomes, on one hand, the source of the master ComicBase database that if you say file new database in the program, there's a compressed file that gets unwrapped and used so you can start your database. That's going to be what that is. There's a separate version of that that gets a whole bunch of data taken out of it, which is used as the basis of the Express and the free databases. Those ones notably have, the free is a demo, and the Express is meant to be our starter product, meant for people who just want mostly to price their stuff, keep track of it, but are not deeply invested in the minutia of who wrote, drew, whatever, everything else. And so in order to get the Express product out, we take out a ton of information. We take out literally, I think it's something like 5 million creator credits, storylines, and so forth out. Those are part of the master database that gets used in the Pro and the Archive edition. They're not part of the demo or the Express database, but on the other hand, those products come in with a much cheaper price point. But both of those databases get made out of whatever is going to be current as of this next week. The picture discs, we've switched up our production process on this. It used to be that picture discs would take us like 2-3 solid weeks to do. We did some heavy lifting a couple of years ago where we actually have a way so that we can compress not just the entire slew of all 1,060,000 pictures that we have in there at all different levels that would fit on Blu-rays and would fit on Pros and would fit on everything. We have to compress these like 4 different sizes and different disk capacities and things like that. It used to be an absolutely god awful mess, and it took literally we'd have special computers, like their whole job was just to sit there and compress stuff all day long. We'd let them run for weeks and hope to God that we were all done, it fit onto the appropriate disk. We've gotten that a little bit more scientific, where we actually can say, okay, the following 2,000 pictures have changed this week. We're going to go just to those ones there and reincorporate those into our big glob of compressed stuff that we've been doing all along, and it greatly limits how much we have to do. We've also managed to dial in much more how hard we have to compress things to fit the discs. And one thing that's a big factor for us here is this I'm going to say might be the last year we put out picture discs, because the move towards diskless computers, where your computer just doesn't have an optical drive on it, has been so huge. It used to be 4 years ago, we used to go through just thousands and thousands of discs in the course of a release. Just huge quantities every quarter. And now we've got to the point where we're probably at 1/10 of what we once did in terms of how many discs get ordered. Almost everything is switched to download these days. Downloads have gotten much faster. We've really reprogrammed the program to work very efficiently as a download. And so instead of trying to deliver like 90 gigs of content on Blu-ray discs anymore, we've really retooled everything we do in ComicBase now to give you I think it's a total of like 8 gigs of thumbnail and high quality first images as part of the standard install, with a 1,060,000 images overall. But then we also rig it so that every time you touch any of those images, like, oh, I just want to look at it, in fraction of a second, we've downloaded a much bigger, better version of that one than we ever could have fit on the discs themselves. That model was experimental 2 years ago. We fully embraced it this last year, and now we've kind of kicked it into overdrive this last time out, with what's going to be part of ComicBase 2025. I'm not going to be terribly surprised if this is our last year that we publish physical discs. We might do them as like a collector's item or something like that, or just by special request or something. But I'd say the market has clearly spoken that download is working for people. So that's something where, like, I'm going to say, if we ever got to the point where I wasn't putting out discs anymore, I would miss having the physical thing around, because I love looking at the art. I love looking at the physical object, and honestly, I like having the thing in my hand, one way or another. But it is definitely one of those tech shifts that's moved on, and I would not be surprised if this is our last go around. But we're going to let the market speak in on that one, one way or another. But the picture discs is normally our main gating problem after the content on that one. After that, we have a lot of marketing meetings. We have to boil down from everything that we changed over the last development part of Magic Castle. We had our big feature list we started with, and then we have to sit down there and say, okay, great, we did these things for reasons. Now, what are the ones we can make some kind of hay about from a marketing standpoint? Because you don't want to boil. Your marketing list is basically a short list of what you would tell a buddy as to why they should buy the new version. You're not trying to say, here's the release note changes, and knock yourself out because, yes, there's lots of things on here. You can see that, yes, lots of things have changed. You got to make the story simple enough to be able to be related. And so the marketing is going to come down to basically, yes, much more sophisticated and accurate grading of, handling of graded comic books, and a ton of quality of life improvements that make the program much easier to use, much faster to install, much easier to get around with, and much easier to enter data with, and more fun overall. That's kind of the marketing points that come down to it, or at least that's the short version of what's going to be in the next version. And then you say, what are the top 5 features that we've put into the main one that play to the story that we're telling, and what are the 10 supporting points that we're going to make bullet points of, and say, for everyone who does want to get into the tweaky specifics of it. But we again, we're like the buskers. We only eat once you put enough money in the guitar case. So what are the things that we're going to tell people that are going to make them say, oh yeah, hey, that sounds like a good idea. A good use of my money would be to buy the new version. But you don't get that by exhausting people and wearing them out by listing feature after feature after feature after feature. You get there by listing a few things that they actually care about. And so you have to guess, what are those things that hopefully you've already done, you've been doing all this time. But how do you communicate that in the smallest number of words in the most compelling way? And that's what you're polishing up towards the end of the process, right before you actually release. After that, we work on art production. We call them the slicks. They're the things that go inside the DVDs. There's ads. You're going to use repeated imagery typically, because we spend so big getting that the painting typically that forms our major image in the whole thing. We tend to use that image a lot. When we got it, so you'll probably see that magician everywhere we go. When we're talking about the next version of ComicBase, you certainly saw the Archangel everywhere we went with the last version, or the pirate, the version before that. Funny thing is, you can't see from where I'm at, but I'm staring at the painting of the pirate right across the room from me right now. It's at some point I'll have to do like a walk around of my office here, so you can all see all the cool crap I got on my walls here, because it's anyway, there's some neat stuff here. We at that point we got to produce the web pages that talk about all the stuff here. We have the what's new page. The what's new one it's partly marketing, it's partly the feature thing, but it's like, here's just everything new about the new release that you might care about in a thumbnail. And we can handle, again, tweaky little points in like release notes, but we got to have just like, just the one sheet which says, okay, here's what's new and why you should care. And the last thing we're going to do, and this is new for this year, and is we are having a getting started video. So yes, that thing that we always talk about doing, it's literally a requirement of the release. So that when you launch the final program for the very first time, it's going to say, "Hi, are you new here? Would you like to figure out how to get your stuff entered in ComicBase?" And it's going to take you straight to a video where, yes, I will be talking about how to use the new version to get your stuff entered in ComicBase very, very quickly. And there's a version we did about 10 years ago for an older version of ComicBase. This will be a much updated version thereof, and very much needed, because a lot of people watching this program right now are going to be people who've been using ComicBase forever, but we're always every day we're selling ComicBase to someone who's never seen it before, and sometimes has the wrong model of even what we're doing. Like I was just explaining to a guy the other day, it's like why it is that it's probably not a good idea to flip your view over to just things I own if the next thing you're going to do is go looking for something to put into your collection, because you're taking something you don't own at that point, which you won't be able to see, and you're trying to add it to stuff you own. And so anyway, there's just basic concepts that we are all second nature to all of us, which if you come in from something else, or just a different set of expectations, maybe they're completely foreign to you. But just getting people started off right is such a big thing that we can do, and we're taking this very seriously. About this time, is we're aiming for about a 4.5 minute long video to just say, all right, and here's how you get your stuff into ComicBase really quickly, and here's where you go for more information. And we're going to try to lead folks by the hand and make this very visual. So long overdue, and that's literally, we're not shipping without it. So that's coming. Then finally, the release itself, on release, I'd say release day, but release day is really about 3 days. We at that point will have staged all the new stuff up to our servers. We'll have created the product records, upgrade paths, etc. So in others, when you've got ComicBase 2024 and you want to buy ComicBase 2025 Pro and Archive, all of that stuff needs to be programmed into the databases. They need to resolve to products with product thumbnails and images and websites and stuff like that. It's ridiculously complicated from the back end, just to make it so you say, oh, hey, my subscriptions of 2024 is expired. I need to renew. Oh, well, and then we offer you all the current versions that you could renew to, show you the differences in prices, show you the features that are different that you'll be getting if you do it, and just to make that so that you can click through that whole thing and not go just mental trying to follow it all. It's ridiculous amounts of work to make something look easy, and so that is definitely something we spent a lot of time on before releases. We have separate dev versions of our website. They're just for internal testing. Those all on the day of release get moved into production, so that when you go to the comicbase.com, you're not looking, you see the updated stuff. We mark the update as live, which means on the servers, we finally we changed some product codes from standby to go. And at that point, when you say check for updates, is there anything new, you'll get a big message saying, oh, hey, you've been using ComicBase 2024 Archive. There's now a ComicBase 2025 Archive. Your subscription's still good, so you get it for free. Click here to download it. And at that moment, when you click on download, the new program's going to come down to you, and you will get it. At that point, all you got to do is run the installer, and it'll carry your data over, and you'll be up and running and good to go. That's at least certainly the way we like to have it work. But anyway, once that happens, we want to make sure that we've also updated our Facebook and our websites and so forth to say, hey, new version's out there. And then finally, the very last thing we do on a release is we send out an email to everyone saying, all right, guys, the new version's out here. This is why it's new and wonderful and cool. Go to your internet, go say check for updates to get it. If your subscription is expired, or you want to come in new, here's how you go to order it. And at that point, we sit there like nervous cats for about 2 hours. And then, assuming the world hasn't come crashing down, the servers haven't overloaded, a horrific bug somehow that's made it through 6 months of testing hasn't just emerged, any of the other things that are endemic as problems to software, if all those things haven't happened, at that point, I go and get a beer. So anyway, that is the path. That is what all this stuff is like. Yeah, as I put, in my end here, I worry like a crazy person, and I eventually go have a beer, and that's the release schedule, and hopefully that's what's happening a little bit less than 2 weeks from now. Just want to do a quick check over on things here. Some talking about facsimile covers. We'll hit that one later on. Let's see here. No such thing as too much comics. Yeah, right. Our mod, of course, reminds everyone about the PSAs. Please, if you like the sort of thing at all, hit the like and subscribe. I don't know another place on the internet where you'll get a software guy talking about how the sausage is made. And this is either the dumbest thing in the world. There's a really good chance of that. I keep on saying it, and I keep on half believing it. But I very much appreciate the chance to talk to you guys about the whole thing, and I very much appreciate you guys for supporting us all these years. So I figured, just like again, if we were sitting around at a barbecue and we were just talking about stuff, this would be what I'd be telling you then. So anyway, please, he wants to remind everyone, do hit like and subscribe. If you're watching this post live stream, please leave comments. That actually winds up being the special sauce to getting the YouTube algorithm to actually put the message out, is literally just in the comment for the live stream, just write something like, Pete, so glad you're wearing clothes, whatever the thing is. But it winds up having a massive magnifying effect on the reach of these things. Do not forget, by the way, the ComicBase message boards are at forums.comicbase.com. We do have a dedicated message board thread for live stream topics, and of course, we also have one for upcoming features. If your feature isn't already scheduled for ComicBase 2025, it's not going to be in the initial release at this point. But we do watch that thing. It's one of the main sources for where we get ideas for things, as well as the chat, frankly. And also, don't forget about the torrent to Andre's World Fairs ComicBase cover catalog. And the new edition just came out. Sweet. All right, guys. Well, that's about it. JC says, thanks, go for the beer, and I'm going to do that. So, guys, I will see you on the next one, and then after that, we will be talking about ComicBase 2025 while looking at it. So I'll see you on that one. Take care. Bye-bye.